If I ever do any writing on the Battle of Gettysburg, it's probably going to be about the brigade from New York. The 39th New York, 111th New York, 125th, 126th. They initially came together as a brigade in mid-September 1862 and were immediately thrown to the wolves trying to defend Harpers Ferry. They surrendered and spent time in a parole camp and earned the rather unfortunate nickname, the Harpers Ferry Cowards. But one general did believe in them. He would take them over and make them into a very good brigade. Let's talk about how this brigade came into being. After the failure of the 7 Days Campaign, President Lincoln is going to call two different sets of new volunteers for the Union Army. The first ones to serve for 9 months, and the second ones, 300,000 of them, to serve for 3 years. From the second set, we are going to have 3 new regiments recruited in upstate New York. The 111th Regiment from around the Rochester and Auburn areas, the 125th from the Troy Rensselaer areas, pretty much across the river from Albany, and the 126th, which again is going to be from the Upper Finger Lakes region around Geneva. They're going to be joined with what's left of a veteran regiment, which is the 39th New York. The 39th New York is from New York City and has a large contingent of foreign-born soldiers, to the point where it was named the Garibaldi Guards. Okay, let's take a look at the big picture with this brigade. From a big wide view, a 10,000-foot view, we're on Thursday, July 2nd, 1863. It's going to be the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg. Quick reminder, on the first day, the Confederates attacked from the north and the west of town, and they're going to rout the Union Army up there. The hills and ridges to the south of the town, though, they don't follow up and take. It's highly questionable whether or not they could have taken them anyway. Let's also remind ourselves of what an army looks like and how it's made up. First off, you have the Army. Army commanders are going to be Robert E. Lee on one side, George Meade on the other. Under that, you have Corps. Corps is between 10 and 20,000 soldiers. Confederates have 3 corps, the Union have 6. Under that, you have divisions. In each corps, there are between 2 and 4 divisions. Under that, you have brigades. In each division, there are a number of brigades, again, usually between 2. I think the most at Gettysburg is going to be a 5-brigade division. And each of those brigades is made up of about 5 regiments or so. Some have more, some have less. Our focus here, again, is going to be on a new brigade of the Army of the Potomac, the 3rd Brigade of the 3rd Division of the 2nd Corps. Okay, so when now this brigade has gone into action, they were originally scheduled after they were brought into the Army to be guarding trains in southern Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, when they come into the Army, this is when Robert E. Lee and the Army of Northern Virginia are making their first foray into Northern Territory, specifically into Maryland. Part of that invasion is going to be trying to capture a major Union force at Harpers Ferry. My own belief, my own theory is that they want Harpers Ferry so that they'd have a consistent supply line back into Virginia, because they intended to stay north for a while. So this brigade, barely know what they're doing, are going to be set into action at Harpers Ferry, which at that point is still in Virginia. They're lucky they know how to load their guns at this point. They really don't have any idea what they're doing. And they're going to be forced into action on the west side of Harpers Ferry at Boulevard Heights. The picture here shows that. And also on the north edge of Harpers Ferry at a place called Maryland Heights. Both these positions, you can see from that picture there, they're very high up and should be easy to defend in theory. But this relies on having an idea of what you're doing in the Army and having competent commanders. This brigade doesn't have either one of those. Important also to note that on Maryland Heights, the Confederate forces that forced them from their position are a brigade from Mississippi. This is going to come up later. They're forced back into Harpers Ferry proper, and if you've ever been there, you'll know it's a little tiny town surrounded by hills. You can't fight there. And they're going to end up surrendering on the 15th of September, 1862. Because of their rather ignominious start, they're nicknamed the Harpers Ferry Cowards, although they're far from the only ones to fail at Harpers Ferry. When they are surrender, they are what's known as paroled. In the Civil War, what parole meant is that effectively you were being held captive by your own army. You couldn't go anywhere near combat until a proper prisoner exchange had happened. And for this brigade, that means they're going to be shipped out west to a prison camp outside Chicago named Camp Douglas. This is one of the more infamous prison camps in the North. It has a reputation that is almost as bad as, say, Elmira. The men don't do well there, but those that survive end up being sent back to Washington for the end of 1862, and they're also going to get a new brigade commander, a guy named Alexander Hayes. It's hard to overstate Hayes' effect on this brigade. Hayes himself is originally from Pittsburgh. He does spend a couple years studying at Allegheny College before transferring to West Point. He's going to graduate in 1844, and one of his best friends at West Point is pictured here with him, a very scrawny kid from Ohio named Ulysses Grant. Hayes goes on to fight in the Mexican War, but will resign from the Army as soon as the war ends. He will eventually make his way to California during the period of the Gold Rush. After a few years, he returns home, broken with a serious drinking problem, and goes into engineering for a railroad. Once the Civil War starts, Hayes rejoins the Army and eventually rises to command of a brigade. However, he is going to be wounded at Second Bull Run. This is actually a very good thing because it places him in the right place at the right time for this brigade. Over the first few months of 1863, Hayes gives the brigade the training they never received before. And by the time he's done with them, they are a good unit and are ready for combat. In late June 1863, Hayes himself is promoted to command of a division in the 2nd Corps of the Army of the Potomac. The brigade itself is transferred out of the Washington, D.C. defenses into the 2nd Corps into Hayes' division. The new brigade commander is their senior colonel, George Willard. George Willard was born in New York City, but he grew up in Troy, New York. In 1847, he enlisted in the Army during the Mexican-American War. He would stay in the Army and eventually rise to the rank of captain, going from enlisted man to officer. During the Civil War, his regiment, the 8th U.S. Infantry, was one of the few that actually got to serve with the Army of the Potomac, and they served very well, especially in the Peninsula Campaign where Willard was with them. After that, Willard was sent back to New York to recruit a new regiment, the 125th New York, becoming its colonel and commanding officer after it was formed. So Willard's brigade is going to start a bit south of where they would end up on day 3, somewhere here in the middle of the Cemetery Ridge, near Meade's headquarters. They're going to get their orders to go south and plug several holes that are forming in the lines. Barksdale has already broken through the Peach Orchard line. The brigade they were sent to stop is an interesting story, too. They were commanded by a former pro-slavery Mississippi congressman named William Barksdale. Before the war, he had been part of a large fight in the floor of Congress that I'll have to do a future video on. But Barksdale had risen to be one of the best brigade commanders in the Army of Northern Virginia, doing particularly good work at the Battle of Fredericksburg. It has turned north because he actually remembered the original orders. One of his regiments, the 21st Mississippi, is breaking away to go after guns. And they're going to wind up near the Trostel farm. 21st Mississippi. Barksdale. Last 2 brigades under Cadmus Wilcox and David Lang are breaking through Humphrey's line on the Emmitsburg Road and pushing forward. So right here, Willard gets his orders, head out. Stop those men. The last thing that General Hayes says to Willard is knock the hell out of him. Willard and his men are going to end up going south, and eventually they're going to end up dividing in 3 different directions near the Plum Run Swale. Their most veteran regiment, the 39th, they're going to go after the 21st Mississippi and turn them back. They're actually going to recapture some of the guns the 21st Mississippi captured. 111th is going to attack northward and end up going after Cadmus Wilcox and David Lang. The most famous group to attack them actually attacks from this area here. That's the 1st Minnesota. The 1st Minnesota's charge, very costly to them, but Wilcox and Lang have already fought through a line. That one charge rattles them. What finishes them off entirely is the 111th. They're going to be sent back. Last, the other 2 regiments, the 125th and 126th. They are going to go after Barksdale himself. Keep in mind, this brigade at Harpers Ferry had been forced from their position by Barksdale's brigade. So this is a moment of very much getting revenge. The fight with Barksdale eventually is going to lead all the way out to the Emmitsburg Road. They're going to rout Barksdale. Barksdale's pretty fought out as he's had to fight through the peach orchard, fight through Humphreys' men retreating. So they're pretty fought out. By the time these 2 regiments hit him, that's it. 125th and 126th are going to advance almost all the way to the Emmitsburg Road. When they get out that far, they realize they're under artillery fire. The Confederates are starting to move guns up into the peach orchard. They're seriously out in front of the line with no help. So they start falling back. About 150 yards in front of what's now the Pennsylvania Memorial, Colonel Willard is going to be killed. As the regiments all start to regroup together and fall back, about 100 yards west of where the Pennsylvania Monument is now, a shell is going to explode right by Colonel Willard and rip off part of his face. Willard, of course, is killed instantly. Far more horrifying is the story of his funeral, because Willard is shipped home to Troy, where he's laid out in an open casket with a flag covering the part of his face that was missing. Stop and think about this, though. With a wound like that, I'm not sure you could be embalmed in those days. It's a few days after he died, in July, in an open casket. That is just horrifying. One of the reasons I sometimes prefer Antietam to Gettysburg is the fact that it seems just a lot quieter. There's much more somber, much less active, much less visitors. And it always seems to be just quieter and more calming, even though it's a much sadder place because 23,000 people are killed and wounded in one day. Out here by the spot where Colonel Willard fell, I'm seeing is one of the most quietest spots in the battlefield, one of the most peaceful spots in the battlefield. Command then passed to the commander of the 126th New York, Eliakim Sherrill. Sherrill continued the retreat back to their original position on Cemetery Ridge. However, when he got there, he ran face-to-face with his corps commander, Winfield Scott Hancock. Hancock was livid that they had retreated. He thought they should have stayed right out there on the road where they were. With no explanation, Hancock immediately fired Sherrill and placed Sherrill second in command, not even the next guy in order of seniority in the regiment, Lieutenant Commander James Bull, in command of the whole brigade. Their rallying cry as they attacked Barksdale was, "Remember Harpers Ferry." The stain of Harpers Ferry was now gone from this brigade, but their Battle of Gettysburg was not over yet. After coming back to the main line on Cemetery Ridge, the brigade is placed up toward the northern end of the ridge, right near Cemetery Hill, and eventually Hancock calms down, or is calmed down by his division commander, Hayes, and does restore Eliakim Sherrill, who we see right here, to command of the brigade. They're going on July 3rd, they're of course going to be under the bombardment, and they're also going to be in position to repulse the northern end of what becomes known as Pickett's Charge. The brigade on July 3rd is going to be attacked as part of the Pickett-Pettigrew assault by another brigade of Mississippians, this time under the command of Joseph R. Davis. That name should sound very familiar, as Joseph Davis is the nephew of Confederate President Jefferson Davis, and no one on either side, Union or Confederate, is under any illusion of how he got his job. The brigade is going to be posted in the area of the Bryan Farm, right here, owned by a free black man who wisely got out of town before the Confederates got here, up through the area of Ziegler's Grove, back in here. The monument, the 126th, is back in this area here. As such, they are going to be the main ones responsible for stopping the northern part of the Pickett Pettigrew assault, namely Davis's brigade. Davis's brigade doesn't get too far past the barn here. Specifically, Eliakim Sherrill to finish the story, because while they are turning back the charge of Davis's brigade, Sherrill is going to be shot and mortally wounded. Also wounded somewhere farther down the line, near the same time, is Winfield Hancock. Hancock had never quite forgiven Sherrill for his actions on July 2nd, but during his own convalescence started to feel bad about it. When Alexander Hayes went to visit Hancock while he was convalescing back home in Philadelphia, Hancock asked him, "Whatever happened to that colonel I placed under arrest at Gettysburg? I think I should go apologize to him." Hayes, not willing to take any of Hancock's crap, said, "That's always your damn problem, Hancock. You wait too long for these things. He died at Gettysburg."